The Vrakush had been hunting across the stars for 3,000 years. They were tall creatures, nearly 8 feet in height, with dark scales covering their bodies and 4 powerful arms that could tear through metal. Their society was built on one simple truth: the strong hunt the weak. They had conquered 17 star systems and destroyed countless species. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever even tried. When their scouts first found Earth in the year 2847, the Vrakish High Huntmaster Zoral Keth looked at the reports with mild curiosity. The humans were an interesting species. They had spread to 12 colony worlds and built ships that could travel faster than light. They seemed brave and stubborn. Keth smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Perfect prey, he thought. Strong enough to make the hunt exciting, but too weak to pose any real danger. The invasion came without warning on a cold morning on the colony world of New Geneva. Vrakish hunter ships dropped from the sky like black rain, and plasma fire turned buildings to ash. The colonists tried to fight back. They grabbed weapons and formed defensive lines. But their guns were like toys compared to Vrakish technology. Within 6 hours, New Geneva was gone. 40,000 people died that day. Lieutenant Commander Katie Morgan was serving on the patrol vessel Defiance when the distress signal reached them. She stood at her console, her hands shaking as she listened to the final screams from New Geneva. The bridge was silent. Everyone was listening. Everyone was afraid. Captain Henry Cole was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the fleet for 30 years and had never heard anything like this. He watched the footage coming through, showing massive reptilian creatures tearing through human soldiers like they were made of paper. He watched their ships, sleek and deadly, burning everything in their path. "We have to go back," Katie said, her voice breaking. "We have to help them." Cole shook his head slowly. "There is nothing left to help. Our job now is to warn Earth. If we die here, no one will know what is coming." The Defiance turned and ran. It was the hardest thing Katie had ever done, leaving those people behind. But she understood. Someone had to survive. Someone had to tell the story. They reached Earth 3 days later, carrying footage that would change everything. The images spread across the planet within hours. People watched in horror as the Vrakish tore through New Geneva. They saw the size of the enemy, the power of their weapons, the complete lack of mercy in their black eyes. Within a week, 4 more colonies fell: Meridian, Outpost 7, New Shanghai, Kepler Station. Each one sent desperate calls for help, and each one went silent. The Vrakish did not ask for surrender. They did not make demands. They simply arrived and killed. The United Terran Council. It's called an emergency meeting in the Great Hall on Earth. Every leader from every remaining human world was there, either in person or through holographic connection. The room was filled with fear. People were talking about evacuation, about hiding, about begging for mercy. Admiral Patricia Vance walked to the center of the room. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and a face that showed no emotion. She had fought in 3 wars and had never lost a battle. But this was different. This was not a war between humans. This was something much worse. "I'll not lie to you," she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "The Vrakish are faster than us. They are stronger than us. Their technology is at least 200 years ahead of ours. By every military measure, we cannot win this war." The room erupted in panic. People shouted questions and accusations. Some demanded to know why the military had not prepared for this. Others called for immediate surrender. Vance raised her hand, and slowly the room fell quiet again. "I did not say we should surrender," she continued. "I said we cannot win by conventional means. But humanity has never been a conventional species. We did not survive ice ages by being conventional. We did not cure diseases and reach the stars by being conventional. We survived because we refused to give up. We survived because when something tries to kill us, we find a way to kill it back." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every leader, every soldier, every frightened civilian watching from home. "The Vrakish think we are prey. They think we will run and hide and die quietly. They are wrong. We are the children of warriors and survivors. We are the species that invented fire and split the atom and walked on other worlds. And I will be damned if I let us become someone else's dinner." The vote was held that night. It was unanimous. Humanity would fight. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Factories that had been making consumer goods were converted to produce weapons. Scientists who had been studying peaceful applications of technology were now designing bombs. Young men and women lined up at recruitment centers, ready to give their lives for a species they had never thought about before. Katie. Morgan was promoted to commander and given a new ship. She spent her days training crews and her nights studying the enemy. Every piece of footage from the fallen colonies was analyzed. Every scrap of information about Verkish tactics was collected and shared. Humanity was learning, slowly but surely, how the Vrakish fought. On the jungle moon of Kepler 7b, a group of colonists refused to evacuate. They were led by a former Marine named Daniel Price, a big man with a scarred face and cold eyes. When the Vrakish came, Price and his people disappeared into the forest. They did not run. They waited. The first Vrakish hunting party entered the jungle expecting easy kills. They found pit traps instead, filled with sharpened stakes. They found tripwires connected to explosives. They found humans who knew the terrain better than any alien ever could. 20 hunters went in. 3 came out. Price watched from the shadows as the survivors fled back to their ship. He did not smile. There was no joy in killing. But there was satisfaction in proving that humans could fight back. There was hope in showing that the Vrakish could bleed. Back on Earth, Admiral Vance received reports of Price's resistance with growing interest. The Vrakish were predators, yes. But predators had weaknesses. They expected prey to act like prey. They did not know what to do when prey became dangerous. "We need to study them," Vance said to her advisors. "Every battle, every engagement. We need to learn everything about how they think and how they fight. And then we need to use that knowledge against them." And the war had begun. Humanity was losing. But somewhere in the darkness of space, the burned ruins of fallen colonies, and the desperate holdouts of resistance fighters, something was changing. The prey was learning to bite back, and the Vrakish had no idea what was coming. 6 months had passed since the first attack on New Geneva. 11 human colonies had fallen. 40 million people were dead. The Vrakish fleet pushed deeper into human space every week, burning worlds and hunting survivors. By all measures, humanity was losing the war. But something strange was happening, something the Vrakish had never seen before in 3,000 years of conquest. The humans were not breaking. They were adapting. On Kepler 7b, Daniel Price had turned his small group of survivors into an army. What started as 50 frightened colonists had grown to over 300 fighters. They lived in the jungle like ghosts, sleeping in hidden caves and moving through the trees without making a sound. The Vrakish sent hunting party after hunting party to find them. None succeeded. Price had learned how the Vrakish thought. They were predators, which meant they followed patterns. They searched in expanding circles. They communicated using specific frequencies. They always approached from downwind. Once you understood the pattern, you could break it. His fighters set traps along the Vrakish patrol routes. They planted explosives near their landing zones. They attacked supply convoys and disappeared before reinforcements arrived. In 3 months, they had killed over 200 Vrakish hunters. The jungle moon had become a nightmare for the invaders. Zoralketh received reports of the resistance with growing confusion. This was not how prey behaved. Prey ran, prey hid. Prey did not study their hunters and use that knowledge to kill them. He sent more troops to Kepler 7b, but the problem only got worse. Every new hunter who arrived became another target for Price's fighters. "They are learning," one of Keth's advisors warned him. "Every battle teaches them something new about us." Keth dismissed the warning with a wave of his clawed hand. Let them learn. No amount of knowledge will save prey from a superior predator. But deep in his ancient hunter's mind, a small voice whispered that he was wrong. Back on Earth, a young physicist named Lucy Brennan was working on something that would change the course of the war. She was small and quiet, with messy brown hair and glasses that were always slightly crooked. Before the invasion, she had been studying wormhole theory. The idea that space could be folded to create instant connections between distant points. It was purely theoretical work. It's interesting, but useless. The war had made it very useful. Lucy worked in a secret laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by the brightest minds humanity had to offer. They worked 20-hour days, fueled by coffee and desperation. The goal was simple, but impossible. Create a device that could transport matter instantly, from one place to another. After 4 months of failure, they succeeded. The first test was small. A metal cube about the size of a fist placed in a chamber. And one side of the laboratory. Lucy activated the device, and for a split second, reality tore itself open. The cube vanished. Half a second later, it appeared in a receiving chamber on the other side of the room. Lucy stared at the cube, her hands shaking. It had worked. It had actually worked. She requested a meeting with Admiral Vance immediately. The Admiral arrived the next day, escorted by a team of security officers who looked very confused about why they were in a physics laboratory. "Show me," Vance said simply. Lucy ran the demonstration again. This time, she transported a small drone from the laboratory to a receiver station in orbit around the moon. The drone vanished from Earth and appeared near Luna less than a second later. Vance watched the data scroll across the screens. She was not a scientist, but she understood what she was seeing. How far can you send something? In theory, there is no limit, Lucy replied. Distance does not matter. What matters is having a precise target location. If we know exactly where we want to go, we can get there instantly. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. What about sending people? That is the next phase of testing. But yes, it should be possible. Vance was quiet for a long moment. Lucy could see the thoughts moving behind her eyes, the military applications becoming clear. Finally, the Admiral spoke. The voracious ships are fast. Faster than anything we have. That speed is their greatest advantage. They can strike our worlds and retreat before we can respond. But if we could put soldiers directly onto their ships, mid-battle, without warning, that advantage disappears. Lucy nodded slowly. We would be turning their strength into a weakness. Exactly. Vance placed her hand on Lucy's shoulder. I am giving your project unlimited funding. You have 6 months to make this work with human subjects. Can you do it? Lucy thought about the millions of people who had died. She thought about the colonies still burning. She thought about the children who would never grow up because the Verkish had decided humans were prey. I can do it in 4, she said. The project was given the code name Achilles. Lucy worked without rest, pushing herself and her team beyond all reasonable limits. They tested with animals first, then with volunteers who knew they might not survive. Some of the early tests failed. People died. But with each failure, they learned, and the technology improved. Meanwhile, the war continued. Human ships fought desperate battles across the colonies, buying time for people to evacuate. Commander Katie Morgan led raid after raid against Verkesh supply lines, destroying fuel depots and weapons caches. She was becoming famous, a symbol of human resistance. The news networks called her the ghost of the colonies. Katie did not feel like a hero. She felt tired and scared and angry. Every day, she lost friends. Every night, she dreamed of the screams from New Geneva. But she kept fighting because there was no other choice. On Kepler 7b, Daniel Price received word that liberation might actually be possible. Ships were being built. Technologies were being developed. Humanity was not giving up. He gathered his fighters around a small fire in their hidden camp and told them what he had learned. For the first time in months, he saw something other than fear in their eyes. Hope. The Verakish think they are hunting us, Price said, looking at the flames. But they have made a mistake. They have given us time to learn. Time to prepare. And now, we are going to show them what happens when humans stop being prey. The Verakish had conquered 17 star systems. They had never lost a war. They had never even imagined losing a war. That was about to change. 1 year after the invasion began, Lucy Brennan stood in her laboratory and watched history being made. A young Marine named Carlos Reyes stepped into the transport chamber, took a deep breath, and gave Lucy a thumbs up. She activated the device. Reality bent. Carlos vanished. 3 seconds later, his voice came through the communication system from a receiver station on Mars. "I am here. Everything is working. I feel fine." The room erupted in cheers. People hugged each other and cried. Lucy sat down heavily in her chair, suddenly exhausted. They had done it. After a year of work and sacrifice, they had created a machine that could transport human beings instantly across the solar system. Admiral Vance arrived within the hour. She looked at the test data, spoke briefly with Carlos through the communication link, and then turned to Lucy with a rare smile. "You have given us a chance," she said. "Now we need to use it." The plan was simple in concept, but incredibly dangerous in practice. Human strike teams would be equipped with portable wormhole generators. During space battles, while the fleets exchanged fire, these teams would transport directly onto Vraca's ships. They would appear inside enemy vessels with no warning, cause as much damage as possible, and then transport out before the Vrakish could respond. It required perfect timing. It required soldiers who were not afraid to die. And it required a commander brave enough to go first. Katie Morgan volunteered. Immediately, she spent 3 months training with the new technology. Her team was selected from the best soldiers in the fleet. 12 people who had proven themselves in battle. 12 people who understood that this mission might be their last. Their target was a Vrakish destroyer that had been attacking shipping lanes near Saturn. The ship had killed thousands of humans and seemed untouchable. It was fast and powerful and always escaped before human reinforcements could arrive. It was the perfect test for the new technology. The human fleet engaged the destroyer in a conventional battle. Plasma fire filled the void between the ships. Shields flared and buckled. It looked like just another desperate fight for survival. But inside the cargo bay of a small transport vessel, Katie Morgan and her team waited. They wore light armor and carried heavy weapons. Each of them had a small device strapped to their arm, the portable wormhole generator that Lucy had designed. "Remember the plan?" Katie said, her voice calm despite her racing heart. "We appear in their engineering section. We destroy their power core. We get out. No heroics. Just hit them and run." The signal came through. The fleet had created an opening. It was time Katie activated her device and stepped into nothing. For a moment, she was nowhere. There was no light, no sound, no sense of her own body. It was like dying and being born at the same time. Then reality snapped back into place. And she was standing in a dark corridor filled with alien machinery. A Vrakish engineer turned to look at her. Its forearms holding strange tools, its black eyes wide with shock. Katie shot it before it could make a sound. "Team, check in," she said into her communicator. 11 voices responded. Everyone had made it through. They moved through the ship like ghosts. The Vrakish crew had no idea what was happening. Enemies were appearing from nowhere, striking without warning, vanishing before they could respond. The hunters had become the hunted. Katie reached the engineering section and planted explosives on the power core. She set the timer for 60 seconds and gave the order to retreat. Her team activated their devices and disappeared, reappearing safely on the transport vessel. The explosion tore the destroyer apart from the inside. Katie watched through the viewport as the massive ship broke into pieces. Fires burning in the wreckage until the vacuum of space snuffed them out. "Package secured," she reported to Admiral Vance. "The hunt is on." The news of the victory spread across human space within hours. For the first time since the invasion began, people celebrated. They had not just survived a battle. They had won one. They had boarded an enemy ship and destroyed it from within. The impossible had happened. The captured data from the destroyer was even more valuable than the victory itself. Human scientists worked around the clock to understand Vrakish technology. They studied their weapons and their shields and their engines. Within months, human ships were being upgraded with hybrid systems that combined the best of both civilizations, but the most important discovery was not technological. It was psychological. The Virakish had never fought a defensive war. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever threatened their homeworlds. Their entire military was built around attack. They did not know how to defend because they had never needed to learn. Admiral D. Vance looked at the intelligence reports and saw the path to victory. "They are predators," she said to her command staff. "They know how to hunt, but they do not know how to be hunted. We need to change that." Over the following months, more strike teams were trained and deployed. Human soldiers appeared on Virakish ships throughout the occupied territories, destroying them from within. The Virakish tried to adapt, but they were too slow. Every time they developed a countermeasure, humans found a new way around it. Zoroketh watched his invasion fall apart with growing horror. His hunters were becoming afraid. They looked over their shoulders constantly, expecting human soldiers to appear at any moment. Some refused to go on patrol. Others demanded to be sent home. The mighty Virakish war machine was breaking down, not from military defeat, but from fear. "This is not possible," Keth growled to his advisors. "We are the hunters. We are the superior species. How can prey make us afraid?" No one had an answer on Kepler 7b. Daniel Price and his resistance fighters heard the news through a smuggled communication device. Human ships were winning battles. Virakish destroyers were being captured. The tide was turning. Price gathered his people and told them what was happening. In. For the first time in over a year, he let himself smile. "We held the line," he said. "We survived, and now help is coming. But our fight is not over yet. As long as there is one Virakish soldier on this moon, we keep fighting." The fighters cheered. They had been prey for so long that they had almost forgotten what hope felt like. But now it was back, burning bright in their hearts. The Virakish Empire had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. They had never known defeat. They had never known fear. Now they knew both. And humanity was just getting started. 2 years into the war, Commander Katie Morgan stood on the bridge of the Reckoning and looked out at the stars. Behind her ship, 14 other vessels waited in formation. They were about to do something no human fleet had ever done before. They were about to enter Virakish space. The Reckoning was a new kind of ship, built with both human and captured Virakish technology. It was faster and stronger than anything humanity had fielded before. Its weapons could punch through enemy shields. Its engines could outrun most Virakish hunters. And it carried a crew of 500 men and women who had volunteered to take the war to the enemy. Admiral Vance's orders were simple: cause chaos, hit Virakish targets, and make them understand that they were no longer safe. Show them what it felt like to be hunted. "All ships, this is Reckoning," Katie said into the fleet communication channel. "Jump in, 3, 2, 1, execute." The 15 ships vanished from human space and reappeared deep inside Virakish territory. For a moment, nothing happened. Then alarms began to sound on distant stations, and panicked voices filled the enemy. Communication frequencies. The humans had arrived. Their first target was a supply depot on a small moon near the edge of Virakish space. It was a minor installation defended by only a handful of ships. The human fleet destroyed it in less than an hour, reducing the station to burning rubble. Before Virakish reinforcements could respond, Katie's fleet was gone, jumping to their next target. Over the following weeks, they struck again and again. Military outposts, communication relays, fuel stations, mining facilities. Each attack was quick and brutal. The humans would appear without warning, destroy everything they could, and vanish before the enemy could organize a defense. The Virakish did not know how to respond. Their entire military was designed for offense. They had thousands of hunter ships, but very few patrol vessels. They had invasion plans for 100 different species, but no plans for defending their own territory. The humans were exploiting this weakness with ruthless efficiency. Katie learned to think like the enemy. She studied their patrol routes and attack patterns. She identified the gaps in their defenses and struck where they were weakest. Her crew began calling her the Hunter, and the name spread through the fleet. Back on Earth, Lucy Brennan continued to improve the wormhole technology. She developed larger generators that could transport entire ships, not just small strike teams. Suddenly, human fleets could appear anywhere in the galaxy with almost no warning. The Verkish advantage in speed was gone. The psychological impact on the enemy was devastating. For the first time in their history, the Verakish knew what it felt like to be afraid. Hunters who had spent their lives as predators now jumped at shadows. Reports of human strike teams caused panic across their empire. Some commanders refused assignments in vulnerable sectors. Others demanded more soldiers to protect installations that had never needed protection before. Zoril. Keth watched his empire crumble with growing despair. He had conquered 17 star systems. He had killed billions of prey. He was the greatest huntmaster in Verkish history. And now he was losing to a species that should have been extinct months ago. "They are using our own tactics against us," one of his advisors said. "They strike without warning and disappear before we can respond. They target our supply lines and communication networks. They are hunting us the way we hunted them." Keth slammed his fist against the wall, leaving cracks in the stone. "Then we hunt them back. Send every ship we have to find their fleet. I want Commander Morgan brought to me in chains." But the Vergash could not catch the humans. Every time they thought they had located the enemy fleet, it would vanish and reappear somewhere else. Katie was always one step ahead, using the wormhole technology to stay mobile and unpredictable. Meanwhile, the liberation of human colonies had begun. Strike teams landed on occupied worlds and supported the resistance fighters who had been holding out for months. On Kepler 7b, Daniel Price finally saw human ships in the sky above the jungle. He gathered his fighters and launched a coordinated attack on the remaining Verkish forces. The battle lasted 3 days. Price led his people through the forest, using every trick they had learned during their long guerrilla campaign. They knew the terrain. They knew the enemy. And now they had support from orbit. With human warships bombarding Verkish positions and dropping supplies to the resistance, when it was over, Price stood in the ruins of the main Verkish base and looked up at the clear sky. For the first time in 2 years, there were no enemy ships overhead. For the first time in 2 years, he could stand in the open without fear of being hunted. "We won," said one of his fighters, a young woman named Grace, who had lost her entire family in the first attack. "I cannot believe we actually won." Price put his hand on her shoulder. "This was just one battle. The war's not over yet. But yes, today we won." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Colony after colony was being freed. People who had lived in hiding for months emerged into the light, weeping with joy and relief. The Verakish were retreating, pulling back their forces to defend their core territories. Admiral Vance watched the progress reports with satisfaction. The war had shifted fundamentally. Humanity was no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for victory. Katie Morgan received a message from Earth, ordering her fleet to return home for resupply and reinforcement. She had been in Verkish space for 4 months, and her ships were battered and exhausted. But before she left, she sent one final message on the Verkesh communication frequency, knowing the enemy would intercept it. "This is Commander Morgan of the human fleet," she said. "We came to your space. We destroyed your stations. We killed your hunters. And now we are going home to get more ships. We will be back. And when we return, we are coming for your homeworld." She cut the transmission and ordered her fleet to jump, somewhere in the heart of the Vrakish Empire. Zorilketh listened to the message and felt something he had never felt before in his long life. Fear. 3 years after the first Verkesh ship appeared in human space, Commander Katie Morgan stood on the Bridge of the Reckoning and looked out at the enemy homeworld. It was a dark planet, covered in black forests and deep oceans, orbiting a red star that cast everything in bloody light. This was where the Verakish had evolved. This was where their empire had been born. And this was where it would end. Behind her ship, the largest human fleet ever assembled, hung in the darkness. 500 warships carrying over 200,000 soldiers. Every vessel was equipped with the latest technology, a combination of human engineering and captured Verakish systems. They had come a long way from the desperate days when a single Enemy destroyer could wipe out entire colonies. The Virakish had gathered everything they had left to defend their homeworld. Nearly 1,000 ships formed a massive defensive ring around the planet. It was the largest concentration of military power in their empire's history. They knew this was their last chance. If they lost here, they lost everything. Admiral Patricia. Vance's voice came through the communication system from her flagship 1,000 kilometers away. She sounded calm and confident, the way she always did before a battle. All ships, this is Admiral Vance. 3 years ago, the Vergesh came to our homes. They burned our colonies. They killed our people. They thought we were prey, weak and helpless, waiting to be hunted. They were wrong. Katie listened to the words and felt them resonate through her crew. Every person on every ship had lost someone to the Virakish. Every person had a reason to fight. Today we end this war, Vance continued. Not with cruelty. Not with revenge. With justice, we will show the Virakish and the entire galaxy that humanity will never be hunted again. All ships, begin attack run. The fleet surged forward. Engines roared. Weapons charged. 500 ships against 1,000. But the numbers did not tell the whole story. Human technology had caught up to the Virakish. Human tactics had surpassed them, and human will had never wavered. The battle began in earnest. Plasma fire crisscrossed the void between the fleets. Ships exploded on both sides, their crews dying in fire and silence. Katie directed the reckoning through the chaos, picking targets and coordinating with allied vessels. She had fought in dozens of battles over the past 3 years, but this one was different. This one mattered more than all the others combined. Strike teams activated their wormhole devices and began appearing on Virakish command ships. They targeted bridges and engine rooms, killing officers and disabling critical systems. The Virakish tried to adapt, posting guards and sealing corridors, but it was too late. The humans had perfected this tactic over years of warfare. One by one, the enemy command ships went dark. Coordination between Virakish vessels began to break down. Ships that should have been supporting each other were left alone, surrounded by human attackers. The defensive ring was falling apart. Daniel Price was leading one of the strike teams, transported from a carrier at the edge of the battle. After 2 years of fighting in the jungle of Kepler 7b, he had volunteered for frontline duty. He wanted to see this through to the end. His team materialized on a Virakish battleship and immediately came under fire. Price dove behind a console, returning shots with his rifle. The Virakish guards were tough, but his team was better trained. Within minutes, the bridge was clear. Plant the charges, he ordered. We have 30 seconds before reinforcements arrive. Explosives were set. The team activated their wormhole devices and vanished just as Virakish soldiers came pouring through the doors. Seconds later, the battleship's power core went critical, and the entire vessel exploded. On the surface of the Virakish homeworld, Zoral Keth sat in his command bunker and watched his fleet being destroyed. Screens around him showed ship after ship exploding, his greatest hunters dying in the void. 3,000 years of Virakish conquest, ending in a single terrible day. He had been the greatest huntmaster his people had ever known. He had led the invasion of human space with complete confidence. And now he had led his empire to ruin. An advisor ran into the room, panic in his eyes. Huntmaster, the humans have broken through the orbital defenses. They are landing troops on the surface. We must evacuate. Keth shook his head slowly. There is nowhere to evacuate to. This is the end. Stayed in his bunker and waited. He would face the humans as a hunter should, with dignity and courage. He would not run like prey. The bunker's defenses fell within the hour. Human soldiers breached the outer walls and fought their way through the corridors. Virakish guards fell one by one until only Keth remained. Standing alone in his command center, Commander Katie Morgan was the first through the final door. She looked at the ancient Virakish leader, this being who had ordered the deaths of millions of her people, and felt no hatred, only a strange, quiet sadness. Why? Keth asked, his voice a low growl. Why did you fight so hard? Every other species accepted their place in the natural order. Every other species understood that the strong hunt the weak. Why were you different? Katie lowered her weapon. The war was over. There was no need for more killing, because humans do not believe in a natural order, she said simply. We believe in choice. We believe that we decide our own fate, not the universe, not predators, not anyone else. You thought you were hunting prey? You were wrong. You were hunting people who would never, ever stop fighting. Keth was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. I understand now, he said. We made a mistake. We thought strength was everything. We forgot that courage matters more. The Varakish Empire surrendered unconditionally 3 days later. Their fleets were disarmed. Their hunting traditions were abolished. Their worlds were open to inspection and oversight. They would never threaten another species again. Humanity emerged from the war transformed. They were no longer a young species, unsure of their place in the cosmos. They were survivors. They were warriors. They had faced extinction and won. In the years that followed, they built something new. A coalition of species based on cooperation and mutual respect. They shared the wormhole technology that had saved them, allowing peaceful travel across the galaxy. They established laws to protect weaker civilizations from predators, and they remembered. Every year, on the anniversary of the first attack, humans across the galaxy paused to honor those who had died. The colonists of New Geneva, the resistance fighters of Kepler 7b, the soldiers who had given their lives so that others might live. Katie Morgan, retired from military service, and spent her remaining years teaching at a university on deep Earth. She told her students about the war, about the fear and the sacrifice and the eventual victory. She wanted them to understand what their ancestors had faced. The universe is vast and dangerous, she would say. There will always be predators who see others as prey. But we proved something important during the Varakish War. We proved that courage and determination can overcome any enemy. We proved that humans will never stop fighting for their survival. She would look out at the young faces before her and smile. Some species are prey. Some species are predators. But humans are something different. We are survivors. And no one in this galaxy will ever forget that. The war was over. The hunters had been hunted, and humanity stood among the stars, unbroken and unafraid.